Hello and welcome to Sunday Run Day the podcast. On this week's episode, I'm very fortunate to be joined by Will. Now, I was very lucky to meet Will when we were both running the Tokyo Marathon recently, and he's joined the show to share his story and insight into his running journey, but also talking a little bit about what's happening this year. So, first of all, Will, thank you very much for joining the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's been a work in progress to get here, but we're here now.
No, it's great to have you, mate. And as I was talking about, obviously, I wanted to touch a little bit on about your running journey before we get into the big year ahead. So, just touching a little bit. So, go back to the start of your journey and when you first started getting into running.
Running for me was always something I probably wasn't great at school. I didn't really like it too much as a bit of a bigger kid. But then I think it sort of grew into it with sport. I played a lot of sport as a kid, AFL, rugby league, rugby union, and sort of had to pick a path with which way I wanted to go in life. And a lot of my mates were playing AFL at the time, so I chose to go down the AFL sort of background and path and played that for a few years. And then went out of school and I accidentally broke my scaphoid in my wrist, and that set me back quite a bit. And that took about a year and a half to sort of heal, which obviously took me out of contact sport, and all I could do was run. And I picked that up and just learned that I wasn't great at it then, but I found a sort of peaceful side to running where I could run, and all my thoughts and everything that I had built up from that day sort of just disappeared for a little bit of time. And then sort of just based around then, that was probably early 2020, I reckon. And that's where, I sort of figured, I wasn't too bad at it either, but it was still sport. Competitive sport was still something that I wanted to pursue my sort of I guess my hobby. And then, that's where I've sort of always kept running there a little bit. And then 2021, I unfortunately lost my dad, passed away from liver failure. And I sort of wanted to do something. I guess I spiraled out a little bit from where I was at in life, and things weren't great. Footy I was back playing footy, but I was injured again. I was injured a lot of the time. I wasn't getting picked for teams then because as a kid growing up, I was never the best. I wasn't the most talented person growing up, but I was probably my best trait I've always had with me is I'm hardworking. I don't give up on things. If I start something, I've got to finish it. And it sort of led to one thing after another. And then my nan was unfortunately diagnosed with MND. And I sort of learned a lot when I lost my dad with how, your feelings, your emotions are, and, having a bit of regret in life, I guess. And I didn't want to have the regret that I have with my dad, that with my nan. So I made an effort to go up there and spend some time with her. But I also got to witness what motor neuron disease can do, what MND, the effects it has, but only on the person, but then the family members around it. And seeing my mum have to fly up to Queensland quite a lot during that year was obviously took a toll on her. And I wanted to do something, and I had a little bit of time off at Christmas, and I went over there. Went up to Queensland to spend some time with Nan, and we hung out for a fair while, and you just see, the deterioration of what a disease, what a sort of, how harsh that sort of problem could be. And it did take a toll, and I wanted to do something, and I wasn't probably in the best headspace with where I was at in life at that moment. And at the time, Ned Brockman was doing a little bit. He wasn't as big as he is now, but he was doing some stuff back there with 50 marathons in 50 days. And I remember seeing stuff like that, and I was like, well, that's something I want to do. Footy wasn't really fun anymore. I decided that I wanted to do. I'd never run a half marathon before. I'd never run a marathon before, and I'd never run an ultra marathon before. So I decided that I wanted to spend 36 weeks, 9 months of the year, to pretty much raise money for motor neuron disease, but I wasn't going to announce it until I was sure I could do it. So I broke the year up into 36, the challenge up to 36 weeks, with 3 12-week blocks to break it up. And at the end of each 12-week block, I was going to run a half marathon, a marathon, and then an ultra marathon. So I just completed the first 12 weeks and was able to complete my first half marathon. And then after that, I was like, well, I think I should be able to announce, what I'm doing to the world. And, I didn't have a big following. I had some close friends at the time, and During that first 12 weeks, I actually also lost my nan. So it was sort of was a big driving factor that she passed away to the year, this 1 year exactly to the day that my dad passed away. So that took a little bit of a toll on me again. But my biggest motto in life is if I'm going to start something, I've got to finish it. And,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into something half-assed. I'm going to give it my all if I'm going to put all my time and effort into it. So I was blocked in on that sort of, that challenge at the time. And I made sure that the 9 months I went completely sober, um, finished the half marathon, went into the second 12-week block, which actually fell right when we were in COVID. So it threw a couple of spatters in the works because was going to do a race. I was thinking about, trying to go over, to do one of the races, Gold Coast or one of the big Australian marathons, but that unfortunately, with COVID happening, cancelled all of them. So it was from my doorstep around in Canberra here. We have a couple of lakes and all the way down to the city, around that lake, back to the north side of Canberra where I live, around that lake and finish back at my doorstep. And, it's hard because with the COVID restrictions back then, you weren't allowed to exercise for more than 2 hours outside. So
Yeah.
I had to try and sneak in a marathon, which also a lot of my friends at the time wanted to jump in and join, but you couldn't exercise with more than two people or sorry, 5 people, I think it was. So it was the sight to see it towards the end when a lot of my mates joined in. We had packs of five, then me with one other mate, then a pack of five was behind me. So
But
it was pretty awesome to have, so many friends there to come and, support me do that. And that's where I completed my first marathon. And in the last sort of 12 weeks, I did have a few niggles coming off the marathon. So I did, I guess, hindered my first sort of 6 weeks of the last 6 weeks of that training. But down here in Canberra, again, that same lake in the city is a 5K loop, bridge to bridge. And I was planning to do, I planned to do 10 laps of that because my nan used to walk that every day after she finished work and run 50 kilometres and raise money for that. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had was to get that. It was December 4th. I remember it so clearly. It started at 4 a.m. and by 9:30 I'd finished it. And this was running wasn't probably on the trend it is right like it is today. It was definitely, people calling me crazy and whatnot, but now you see 50Ks, it's probably more common than not. But back then it was 50Ks was quite an achievement, and being able to do that, but also, to do it and raise awareness for motor neuron disease, but also do that for my nan and my dad, was probably a big driving factor. And I think I ended up raising about $25,500 for Fight MND,
yeah.
which is a really cool thing for me to do. And that's when I fell in love with running and, being able to tick off all those milestones, which I didn't think I'd ever go back and do another marathon I knew I had to do an ultra marathon, but after that, I didn't think, I wanted to go back to footy again. I was like, I'm had my time with running. Let's go back to footy. But yeah, I think now I'm back running again. And people will say, like, I've always been told, find something you're good at and run with it. And for me, cliche as it is, running is what I'm good at. And I think that's why I've stuck with it for so long.
Oh, mate, thanks for sharing that story. Like, obviously my heart goes out to you as well. Like, such a challenging time for you as well, losing your dad and then losing your nan as well. But what an incredible challenge that you've done. I absolutely love what you set out as well of just having that block, of having that 12-week block of going, I'm going to do a half marathon. I'm then going to have my 12-week block and do a marathon, and then the 12-week block to do the ultra marathon. And like you say, 50K nowadays, yeah, a lot of people going out there and running, very different challenges, doing 50K a
Yeah.
day, all of that sort of stuff. But at that time, for you, that was absolutely impressive. And it's amazing, mate, to be able to run 50K, no matter how long it takes or whatever. I think it's just absolutely incredible. And as you say, what a challenge and what a great achievement. And in the means of all of that, to raise an incredible amount of money to fight MND is just amazing. And yeah, man, hats off to you, mate. What a great challenge and what a great journey that you've come on. And as you say, leads you then into going like, well, that's it. I'm not going to run another marathon again. I'm done. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go back to something else. But here we are, and you now run another marathon or more than one marathon.
Yeah.
Takes me into Canberra Marathon. Now, Canberra Marathon that you done last year, what a phenomenal time, mate. Like, congratulations on running 2:47:16. Absolutely incredible. Like, amazing run. That obviously then spurred you on to where we're going to go down and talk about this year. But just going on to Canberra, we've got Canberra Marathon coming up in a few weeks. Where you're from, I've been lucky to run Canberra Marathon. Just touch on that. How was that experience for you? And, to give a big shout out to Canberra,
Yeah.
how much does you love the Canberra Marathon?
It's great. Canberra Marathon's one of the best. I went a few times. One of my actual housemates completed it a few years before me, and I remember going down there and watching him finish and seeing the finish line and the buzz around the joint, because there's obviously multiple races. There's a half marathon, the 10K, 5K, which is an awesome experience. Just the atmosphere is electric, and I think just having something, running where like you drive every day, you see the roads, you see these buildings, we're pretty lucky here. We've got some pretty beautiful landscapes, like amazing buildings, like, your Parliament House, all the government buildings around town. But yeah, Canberra it's very clean, it's very cool. But it's notorious to either be really cold, really wet, or really windy. So a lot of my prep was umming and ahhing, what the weather was going to be like, because you can get pretty unlucky with some headwind. There is a big section of it, which is Parks Way, where it's just, you got no cover. And if you get a headwind, it's going to probably really set you back. So, I
Yeah.
had my doubts there going into the race. But yeah, I always set out my goal. Obviously I had which we'll talk about a bit later, was the goal to qualify for Boston. And I was umming and ahhing about my time. I was around the 2:52 mark. I knew I had to be a little bit quicker to qualify for Boston.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was like, all right, let's go. Well, I went from 2:55 to realizing I needed a buffer time. So I was like, all right, 3-minute buffer should be all right. And I was put in priority with the quick guys. And as you can tell by a lot of my photos and when you meet me in person, I'm probably not built like a runner. I'm a little bit more solid than your normal runner. So I reckon I was probably 20 kilos heavier than anyone in the start line of the priority line. But I do think that start being in priority was what helped me get my time, because I sat with them for so long. I probably had sat with the priority, the quicker runners for about 12 Ks. And those 12 Ks went really quick. Like, I didn't think about it too much. But it got to sort of one point I guess, it was around the 12-kilometer mark where I looked down at my watch and I was a few, I think I was averaging about 3:55 average pace. And I was like, I need to drop this back a bit, because I've got, still got 30 Ks to go. So I dialed it back a little bit and just was like, all right, let's hold on for another 12. I did have a little bit of a game plan, but I think it went out the window as soon as I started the race, which I was a little bit concerned. I said, let's go back to the game plan for Ks from K12 to 24. And I knew from 24 onwards that was going to be a little bit of a tricky, I guess, more difficult part of the race, because it was very isolated. There's not many people around, and it's probably just you and your thoughts. And it does get a little bit of a gradual hilly and rolling hills, I guess.
Yeah.
So I dialed back for Ks 12 to 24, sat back on my normal pace, about 4:04s, and I am competitive. I'm very, very competitive human. And, a lot of people started to run past me that I, worked to get in front of. And I do take things, sometimes people say you take things too personal and whatnot, but I do hold grudges very much. And, having people run past me, I'm like, all right, don't let your ego get you, just back it off. But then by K24, I was like, I feel really good. And then people that know the Canberra track really well know Parks Way is just you and yourself for a long time. And I got to start with Parks Way and I said, let's just see what I've got here and give it as much as I can. And from 24 to probably, I think, about 38, I just gave it. I went back in to just, remember all those people that just overtook you. Let's headhunt them and try and take them down. And my
Yeah.
sort of competitive football edge sort of came out a little bit, and I just went for it. And it went really quick. Like, the whole experience went quick, but it was me and my thoughts. I didn't feel fatigued. I fueled really well. The hills, when I needed to go a little bit slower up the hills, I took those extra couple seconds to get up those. And then when it was a downhill, I just let my legs do the work and catch my breath and regroup. But then by the probably 38 mark, I remember we were coming around Manuka over that Talopi area, and it was sort of like, all right, I know where I am. I know I've got 4 kilometres left. I've run 4 kilometres. That's from my house to the lake. I've done that run 100 of times. So I sort of put those scenarios in my head, even from 12 Ks away. Like, I know a lot of my training, I know a lot of my runs that I do are based the mostly the same route. So I'm like, I've done this 100 times. What's any difference to this race? And when you get to 5K, it's like, oh, that's a park run. Like, and all the way down to 400 meters, I'm like, that's just a lap of the oval. So yeah, I do build those sort of moments in my head. And um, when you get up to Canberra, sort of the last two Ks, I guess, you sort of start seeing a few more people along the side of the roads, which um, we'll probably talk about Tokyo, but was something for me, like seeing a couple of people on the side of the road really helped me, boost me up, gave me that encouragement. You're nearly there, you're nearly finished. So just that little bit of pushing towards the end was great. And then all of a sudden, the last 200 meters is just people left and right of you. And I saw my mates there on the right. And then all of a sudden, which is quite funny, that some of the photos is there was it must have been the finish of the 2K run for the kids. And then I was running, and then this little kid had come in as well at the same time as me. And the commentators announcing it like we're both racing each other and trying to push right to the end. And he's cheering home. Everyone's cheering home the kid, hoping he can pick me. And I was pretty gone by that stage, and all my mates were there laughing and cheering it on. And there's a good photo as I'm crossing the line. There's me and this kid who's just picked me right at the end like a sprint. And he's got a big smile on your face, and I'm just looking absolutely gassed from what I've just gone through for the last 42 Ks. But now Canberra's one of the best races I've done. Obviously, I've only done a couple of races now with full marathons, but it is pretty cool when you know where you are, you know what's coming up. But also just seeing people, a lot of the guys that, when I do my training runs, I see them out there training as well, and then you see them in the race. So it does have a little bit, like, it's good to see, but with me as well, I'm also competitive. So, I'm like picking people off, and I was like, all right, I've got to beat him. I want to stay at his pace. Like, I know he's quick, so I want to stay with him. And no, it's a really cool atmosphere, Canberra, and it's pretty easy to get around. So a lot of people get around to come cheer you on as well.
No, that's awesome, mate. And I love what you broke down there as well. Of sort of, as you're saying, when we get in that later stages of the race, we see that it's, 4K to go, or, say 400 meters, whatever it might be. And you start having those thoughts of like, man, I've done this run a million times, especially when it is in a city that places that you've run before. It's like myself with Melbourne. It's like if I'm running around Melbourne, I know this, I know the place, I know the route. So you've got that little bit extra encouragement to kind of push yourself. And as you say, having the crowd there when you need it the most kind of really builds you up, gets you through the finish line. And I say, what an incredible time you got, which obviously was your Boston qualifying time as well, which absolutely congratulations, mate. So before we talk about obviously Boston and leading into it, you've taken on the challenge of trying to be the youngest Australian to run all 7 world major marathons in a year, which is just phenomenal. And that's obviously where we met in Tokyo, which was the first race of the year. So first of all, I guess, like, what did kind of give you that idea of wanting to take on the challenge?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a little bit about Tokyo and how your experience was there.
I think with the challenge, it sort of fell into place. With my Boston qualifying, I submitted that and was able to get in. But I knew once I had Boston qualifying, because I had such a good time as well, that time would, I did a little bit of research into it, and, there was like New York Marathon, Chicago Marathon, Berlin Marathon, all took times as well. So I thought, that'd be pretty cool to be able to do them. And then Sydney, I think the big factor for me was Sydney became a major last year. And the thought of doing one on home soil and ticking that off, and I thought my chances to get into Sydney were going to be pretty high, being a Australian resident. So I was like, well, if I can get into four of them plus Sydney's there, I'm like, what's stopping me from doing the other two, which was Tokyo and London? So that was in my head. I was like, well, do I do them all in a year? And it was easy to talk. It was the idea came to me, and I was like, oh, let's just do all 7 in a year. And I don't think I really thought about it, and it's probably only hit me maybe in the last sort of 3 months about how big this is, and what it means to people to run one major, let alone what it means to run all 7 in 1 year. People, like the feeling when you and I met, that in that room, like you see the different ages of people that are there. They're running their 50th marathon. Some people are running their first marathon. Some people have been trying all their life to get a Boston qualifying time. And for me to be able to do that on my first attempt, I think it really sunk into me, like, I've got to make the most of this now, because you don't know how fit you're going to be or whatever happens tomorrow. So for me, it was like, all right, let's do all 7 in a year. Let's see where it can take you. I want to travel. I wanted to see the world. I've got some commitments for the next few years that, will lock me down with being in Canberra, being with work-wise. And I was like, well, this year I'm still young. I'm 27. I want to go explore the world. But if I'm exploring, I want to get something out of it. So that was where the 7 sort of marathons came in. Becoming the youngest Australian only came in when I knew I got into New York. So that was the last one, which I found out about February. And then I had reached out to the Abbott team, and obviously with Sydney coming in, I didn't think not many people would have run 7 world major marathons before because it only was a thing from last year.
Yeah.
Reached out to Abbott. I just asked the question, has anyone done it before from Australia? And they said there's been one. I think he was about 51. So I was like, well, and then what was the youngest Australian to do all 7 ever? And he said that was 29. So I was like, well, I'm 27 now. May as well try and do this and become the youngest Australian to ever do it for now. There's probably going to be someone that once it gets out there wants to try and tip it, which, it should be good. My competitive edge will come out again and I'll try and do something else. But yeah, that's where the 7 world majors came about and then youngest Australian to ever do it.
That's amazing, and I'm excited for the year for you for sure. I'm lucky there, there'll be a couple that I'll be there as well, and we'll obviously catch up as well. And
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be able to complete this challenge. And yeah, just as you say, having that opportunity, I love what you touched on there as well, of just saying, I say where we met in that room in Tokyo as well, like just being around different people that have, you say, tried for years to get into majors or get Boston qualifying times, whatever it might be, and then just having that moment of seeing all the different people there was amazing. And then for you to get this opportunity, and just hats off to yourself, mate. It's really deserved.
I really
You've worked
appreciate that.
hard to get there. So it's not just a case you've been given this. You worked really hard to get there and you've got there. And, mate, I'm actually excited for you to see your 7, see how it goes. And so we met in Tokyo,
Yeah.
and that was a great race for you as well. I seen your time there in Tokyo; it was an amazing one. We shouted before, and we were talking about, you were like, oh, maybe I might take it a little bit easy, but as you said, that competitive edge, competitive spirit comes out. You got in there, run a great time. How was it? Obviously, the first major of the year. How was that for you?
Mate, it was surreal. I had no understanding of what it is to like run a major. I didn't think what it would be like when I got to Tokyo. I was like, oh, this is, running another marathon coming from Canberra. That Canberra had, I think, 3,500 runners, to going, oh, this is going to be a bit different. 38,500 runners at Tokyo. But just being around the people, every second person was from a different country. The whole atmosphere, everyone's there from the same for the same reason. When you go to pick up your bib, going to the expo and seeing all the massive brands there, seeing everyone pre-race, the nerves, like the emotions of a marathon. They're going through the same thing, the same sort of feelings, emotions that you're going through as well. But also just being in another country, it was, I wasn't there very long. I had to jam it in very quickly, but I got that done out day one, and then it was just, all right, let's lock in for the last 3 days here. I've got to sort of work out some of my biggest thing was eating. I had to work out how I was going to eat, what carbs I was going to load up on, and how my fluids were going to all work over there, because as we mentioned, the water stations were a little bit different to other places. But it was so cool, and hearing everyone else's stories before the race, like meeting yourself and your partner, just having those, hearing like where you guys have come from, how many other people are here. That sort of built me up, and that I remember that was the night before, and I got back to my hotel room and I sort of just sat there, and I had a time in my head was just 3:20, and I was a little bit nervous because I had some little niggles with my body going on at the time. But I said, like, I'm only going to be in Tokyo once. This is going to be once in a lifetime opportunity. And remember then waking up next morning, I wasn't as nervous because I had sort of talked myself through what was going to happen. But yeah, going out there, that whole race, like I mentioned back when talking about Canberra, having, you don't see people maybe for the last 4Ks of the race, you've got people left and right of you. But for Tokyo, having literally people from left to right of you, the whole 42 kilometers, people cheering you on. That's probably what helped me with my time. I think I built the adrenaline up so much for 32 Ks. I didn't even think about, I was going to hit a wall or anything. And by 32, I sort of felt, oh, like this is why we're doing marathons. This is where it gets hard. And I was lucky I didn't really experience that in Canberra, but for Tokyo, I was like, all right, now we can push this through. This is what it's about. This is what marathon's about. This is about, building character building, and you're going to get something out of this. So that was like bite down on the mouth guard and just get the job done, which was phenomenal. I didn't really know my time, like when I was running, because I did start a little bit far back in my wave and I could never catch under the sub 3 hour paces. So I didn't actually know if I would, and you find your GPS goes a little bit funny with all the towers around Tokyo. So you were sort of like going, oh, that was a quick K, but then you're hitting your K markers that are on the road way too early.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that threw me out, and then I didn't have my phone on me until I got back to the hotel room. So I finished the race, and you probably experienced it as well, how, productive the Japanese are. You finish your race, you get your medal, they follow your bib colour, and all of a sudden you've got a bag, you've got all these random gifts and a towel, and next thing you're on a bus, and 10 minutes later you're back at your hotel room, back where you started, and the marathon's already packed up. So it was pretty cool seeing how it all operates. But then, going back, checking my phone and seeing that I ran a sub 3 hour marathon, I was like, that was, it wasn't planned for, but it was pretty surreal to know I only had a 10-week training block as well for Tokyo. So knowing off 10 weeks of training, and no, there was a little bit of doubt from myself that, I wasn't going to be able to, hold that pace anymore. But just to see that and just the experience there, I think, Tokyo's a pretty cool one to kick it off.
Yeah.
It's the only Asian marathon. It's the quickest flight for me, so it was nice to have a nice quick flight in and out.
For sure.
Yeah, but no, it was surreal, man. Just meeting people like yourself and other people along the journey, that are going through the same experiences. That was probably the highlight for me from the trip.
Nah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And just say congratulations again. Such a great run, and as you say, an amazing experience. Me and Cara absolutely loved it. We were over the moon with what happened in Tokyo, and just enjoyed everything. And as you say, before we obviously wrap up the podcast, we'll just talk a little bit about the upcoming ones. We've got ones later in the year, and we'll definitely catch up with you again later in the year. But just want to talk about the upcoming ones. So obviously Boston and London. Now, obviously Boston, I'm excited for you to go to Boston. I can't wait for your experience there. I was lucky enough to experience it as a spectator, and it was incredible when Cara went to Boston there last year. But then I'm excited for you to Boston. But then to back off, obviously London 6 days later is going to be a big one. How's the body feeling? How's the preparation going for it?
Yeah, body's feeling good. I had a mandatory sort of 10-day off fee after Tokyo, which was always pre-planned, and I have had a little niggle with my groin that we injected. So I had the injection 5 days after the marathon, then I had another 5 days off. So 10 days in, then I had to slowly build again, which sort of, I feel like I was a little bit behind the 8 ball, but I ran a 22K on Saturday, and I felt good. Wasn't great, I would be honest, and I included some speed work yesterday, so things are feeling like they're back to training, but it's a bit of a weird, funny one. Like, I'm only 3 weeks away from Boston, and I'm peaking. Like, my longest run will be a 30K run, which will be this Sunday.
Yeah.
And then I've got to start deloading again. So it feels like I've only just gotten back to running full, fit again, and now I'm going back down to a deload, which will slow the Ks up. So, I did feel like this though going into Tokyo. I felt a little bit underprepared, but I now know, my mindset, my willpower to when I get out there and just to drive, and that willingness to not lose or to get something done and finish what you started. That's going to drive me to get Boston done. And my big thing for Boston, just again going back to Tokyo, like hearing other people's stories and like yourself, that everyone says it's the pinnacle of running for people. Boston Marathon is the amateur running Olympics. It's what you strive to get to, and to be able to do that in April, that's going to be just one of the most surreal feelings I ever experienced. Just having 4 million people there along the side of the roads cheering you on. It's just going to be really cool. And then going into London, that's going to be, I don't like to overthink. I am an overthinker normally, but I haven't really put too much thought into that one because it is a little bit daunting.
Yeah.
But I know that for Boston, I'm going to have to cool it down, go actually, enjoy it, run maybe around that 3 hours and 20 minutes. And then for London, we'll just, really stride to see what we've got left, but get it done. Obviously, we need that at the end of the day. I've just got to finish. And so, but also enjoy, experience what's there. You're running some pretty cool places. I think London Marathon, looking at the course for that, that's probably one of the coolest tracks, with all the landmarks you're running on or running past, finishing at Buckingham Palace. And I've also got a couple of mates over there in London that are going to be there. So I'm really excited for that because, Tokyo, Boston, they're all sort of on my own. The rest of them are all on my own. But to have a couple of mates in London, that'll be really like a big drive for me and probably help me with a bit of energy that I might need after the 6-day turnaround.
Oh, definitely. No, and like you're right in saying as well with Boston, as amateur runners, it is the Olympics for us. It's something that we strive to get to, and you've done so well, worked so hard to get there. And 100%, mate, enjoy it. Have that moment, enjoy the moment, enjoy being in Boston, have fun. As much as we can have fun when we're running a marathon, we do put ourselves through that, but mate, enjoy it, have fun, and then, yeah, as you say, quick turnaround, but just again, enjoy London, enjoy being around that amazing course. And it's what a great experience for you. I'm super excited for you. I can't wait to hear about it. And yeah, we'll be following you. Anyone listening, online, just please go check out Will. Go follow his story. It's amazing. I'm super excited to get all that accumulation into New York in November as well. We'll be following your journey closely. And mate, I wish you all the best in London and Boston. Just enjoy it to the max.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it a lot. And thank you for everything you've done for me and sharing me on the platform. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm so grateful for you to come onto the show and yeah, excited for what's next. Well, that's it for this week. And as always, until next time, happy running.